we're going to go on to three more new releases from this year over the past, couple of weeks or so. And we're going to start by sticking with horror once again. So, 2024 was so much horror, and now here we're still getting it pretty much weekly, which is exciting. That's personally my favorite genre, probably, at this point. So, yeah, I'm all for this. So let's go ahead and start with Hard Eyes, which I didn't really know about so much, not only with not paying attention to like trailers and advertisements and stuff like that, but also just in general. I just didn't really know much about this, or I'd really seen much about it except for like its poster and its title, and that's all I really knew. I didn't even know like who was in it until practically until I saw it. So going into it, I didn't know what to expect except that it was clearly like some kind of slasher movie. So I wasn't expecting the comedy element, like almost to the point of parody element of it, which was really surprising and kind of refreshing. Where we start off with this couple who's getting engaged, and they're this very sort of snotty, vapid couple, and this obviously very almost like you know those people or you've seen those people, but also in this almost like it's almost just over the top enough that you can realize it's like this sort of walking the line of like parody and satire kind of thing. So that was so going into that, where it's a case of when something inevitably happens to these people, it's probably going to be much more entertaining than it is like horrifying or something like that. And sure enough, that's pretty much what we get for. That's the tone that sets most of the movie up. And we're kind of divided where we're getting the slasher movie that, people who are into that would really want. And there's also this sort of romantic comedy going on, but it's also like, you could almost say it's like a parody romantic comedy, but also kind of a genuine one also. It's like we were talking about before when you kind of define satire and how, like, the blurrier the line is between if you're doing parody or the real thing, only makes it more effective. And yeah, this is clearly, like, a comedy that also has this slasher movie going on. The slasher movie that brings in, like, these sort of real-world cliches that come with, like, serial killers and stuff like that, like how it's they brand him the Hard Eyes Killer, and they even give him the abbreviation HEK, which is pretty much what you would see. Not only probably a callback to BTK, but also just in general what this would probably look like if it was actually on the news as it was happening. And this has been going on for like 2 years, I think they said. And so yeah, then we get the romantic comedy aspect, where we have our lead character who's in advertising, I believe, and this very funny sequence where we see the ad that she's in charge of sort of capitalizing on the fact that the Hard Eyes Killer is now famous, and because he specifically kills couples. So and it's a very funny sequence where they show this ad of the like dead couples of history, done in like this genuinely creative way, but also very funny and intentionally in poor taste for comedic effect. And it turns out that she has a rival who might be swooping in to take her job, who is Mason Gooding. And this is naturally where the enemies turn to lovers potential thing starts to set up. I was also surprised to see New Zealand comedian Chris Parker in that scene also. That was really fun. So yeah, then it starts here. The Hard Eyes Killer sees them kiss for this reason of her running into her ex and them doing like this sort of fake. The thing that you would see in like, a Hallmark movie or some romantic comedy where they have to fake it and then ultimately, oh, is it going to become real? But the trouble is that they've now put themselves in the crosshairs of this very violent serial killer, and it's very funny. The whole setup, like it works as a horror movie, and it works as like a parody, and it works as a comedy and as a romantic comedy. It's got a lot going on, and somehow manages to find the right tone in pretty much everything that's going on here. And it's, yeah, I guess, if you want to talk like pacing or something, we get to a point to where there's a lot of moments that feel climatic, and then they're not. And it's always fun to throw in like that. Like it's kind of a slasher staple to have like the false ending or the false climax that's a fake out. That happens enough to where it's like you kind of start to wonder how long is this movie again exactly. And it's not very. It's only like what, an hour 40 maybe. But it might start to feel a bit tiresome as it does that. I guess another couple of things here that kind of fall short a little bit is, and this I'm sure this falls into the parody angle, but there is a tiring amount of like Gen Z jokes. I think Gen Z is what it is. But it's and there's stuff that feels familiar, like there's a moment when I think Mason Gooding is breaking a window, and it's kind of the joke that was in The Nice Guys, where if you try to do that in real life, you're gonna cut yourself badly. I think the Nice Guys kind of took it farther, but here it's still like, oh, I feel like I know that joke already, but it fits in line with the tone of the movie's jokes that it's making in regards to putting in these real world elements that kind of make it funnier in a way to see it in this over the top slasher movie. So there's that, and there's also stuff that kind of felt tired at first before I was really grasping what the movie was doing, like when we get the main character's cynical outlook on relationships and how like bitter she is, especially now that her ex has like moved on and is happy in another relationship, and the way she just reviews like she sees it as like, love is dead and relationships don't last, there's no point and stuff like that. And before I realized that they were kind of doing this sort of setting up this parody of romantic comedies, it ends up being a nice balance that Mason Gooding's like the opposite of that, where he's also a single guy, but he has like a really positive outlook and an optimistic outlook on love and relationships and stuff like that. Once again, something that you would see in any, romantic comedy or Hallmark movie or whatever. But then, yeah, like I was saying, the slasher movie is still happening. Like, sometimes you might almost forget that the slasher movie's happening, and there'll be moments that... There's one moment in particular that really catches you off guard, where the movie seems like it's pretty sure that you're in the romantic comedy enough that they can just out of nowhere throw the slasher movie right back at you, while you have your guard down. And it's like just the perfect amount of time has passed to where you remember what you're watching, but it's like, well, nothing would happen right now, and then that's when it happens. That was a really impressive sort of throwing you right back into it. And they throw in the cliche things like how he's so like built and muscular, but then he'll have lines that combat it, like these muscles aren't for violence, they're for cuddling. Is a line that stuck out. And Mason Gooding's obviously very good. He already has a lot of slasher practice with the Scream movies, obviously. And yeah, this does feel like a very similar character to that. But it's a very welcome character in a scenario like this. So, in also another movie where it's not just a slasher movie, but one that's kind of aware of what it is and bringing those comedic elements into it and showing the tropes and what you can do with them in fun ways. A lot of similarities there, but I really don't mind him being in this also, because the chemistry's there and the character works so well for both of them. And just the idea in general of trying to convince this violent serial killer that, no, that's not my boyfriend, we're not together, and that's like your biggest defense, because they do a great job of having a killer that really sticks to their gimmick. It's for what it is and for how like over the top gory it is. The body count is very controlled for a movie like this. There is one sequence eventually where we get to a drive-in, and it does kind of feel like the Freddy vs. Jason cornfield moment when they just go crazy and whoever's in sight gets taken down in like this big public setting. But still, the way they committed to the concept, and it was only in like a hectic situation like that did it go off, and there's maybe another explanation for that as well. So like it really covers its basis on what it's doing here. So that's, yeah. And as far as the way it looks, like we got some really effective point of view shots here, which are another like it's a sort of trope of the slasher, but it's one that never, being in the killer's point of view is one of those things that's so eerie it never gets old, especially when it's done really well. The design of Hard Eyes is really, it's one of those things where it might be hard to describe on paper, but when you actually see it, it looks really good in kind of this unexplainable, disturbing sort of way, and in the way the hearts light up, especially in the dark, makes for like a really cool visual. So yeah, as somebody, just in the last video when we were talking about Grafted, I was talking about, if you're unfamiliar with this channel, my love of the slasher genre in general, and how I've been saying for a long time that it needs to have a comeback. I suppose it kind of has been a little bit, not to the extent that it was like in the 80s or anything, but there's been a few in here, and I am really happy with this one also. This was a really fun time, so yeah. Now, and the idea of it coming out like in that sort of Valentine's Day area, but there's like so many different things in here that could be pleasing to a wide array of what audiences look for in a movie, and everybody kind of gets what they want. Just with the fact that the gore, it is like super, super, super gory. But like I said, in this really sort of fun way. So, yeah. So, let's go on to Love Hurts. This one's kind of unfortunate because it was really, really played up. They had Ke Kwan going out there and promoting it like crazy. When he did the Grauman's Theater thing, he was promoting it, and he's been talking about how like it's his first like real leading role. It was, I know he won for supporting for Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you ask me, I'd say he's the co-lead to Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once. But here, it's like he is the lead. Like there's no, like everybody else is supporting to him in this. He is the sole lead, and that's a first for him. And obviously, when you just listen to him talk and you know his story, he's somebody that's very easy to root for. Like you just want this comeback to continue and for him to find all the success, and it's all great. Um, and that's not the reception that this one got. And when you see all the elements in play, it's like, well, what could have gone wrong? And for a while, watching it, like for the first maybe 25 minutes or so, and it's very, very short. It's like an hour 23, I think, and that's with credits. But for the first like fraction of it there, I was like, I don't really see anything wrong with this. I mean, he's bringing his energy. The movie itself has this energy. He's like the really upbeat boss with the jovial personality. He's, you know, giving cookies to everybody that he made. He's in like a realty business. And then there is a jarring cut to his previous life coming into it, when we get this, see him as the jovial happy boss handing out cookies, and then in the next moment he's knocked out, and when he wakes up, his hand is impaled to the desk. And like and it gets really into it really quickly, the fight scenes and the violence and all that. And that's something that's really interesting, the way they were able to do that tonal shift so quickly, but also in a way that's like kind of effective and shows like the two different sides that the movie might have. And it was like, I don't really so yeah, we are in like the John Wick nobody thing, where it's like, yeah, we've been seeing this type of movie so much in the last decade or so, where it's the guy that has the seemingly normal life, and then it's, oh, he actually had a past where he was like a super violent killing machine, and it's coming back to haunt him. And it's like, yeah, we've been so through that already. But still, it's something where if you have, you know, an actor that you can put in the middle of this, that can bring something to it and bring themselves to it, it's something that's one of those things where you can just, like, it's a subgenre at this point, so it's one of those things where it's like, this could just be your thing, and no matter how many times you see it, as long as it's still done well, it won't get old. It just depends on how the person sees that. But, so yeah, at first it was like, I'm forgiving of all the fact that we've seen this so many times at this point now, because there's something to this. There's a personality to it. But then it gets weird. Like after that first 25 minutes or so, it starts to go way all over the place, and interestingly enough, that really short runtime of an hour and 23 minutes starts to feel really long somehow, because it's trying to do so much at once, introduce so many things. There's some things that come in like towards the very end for the first time. And it's very easy to suddenly get lost, and not in the way that you want to get lost in a movie. Like you're just, where are we now, and how did we get here? I don't get any of this, and it's okay. Well, first of all, one of the good aspects is Sean Astin has a couple of scenes, and not only is it nice because it's a Goonies reunion, but Sean Astin's second of those two scenes is probably the best scene in the movie. And it's a scene of him being like a very loyal friend to Kwan's character. And to know that they like have that bond in real life, and then the way it comes through in the movie uses it in this very effective way was really well done. That's a scene that's a lot better than basically everything else in this movie. So there is that. But I guess the other thing we can bring in is Ariana DeBose being the sort of love interest, I guess. This is... I really, really love Ariana DeBose, and was really excited for her as well, on top of Kwan, to, have a movie like this. But it's really when her character comes into it, and any time her character comes into it, that it feels like it's off the rails. And doesn't know what it is or what it's trying to, tell us. Because we do get the backstory, I guess, of what's going on here, and how this all started, and what their relationship is. But I also felt like while we were getting the backstory, we were kind of being pushed even further into the dark. I don't really... And I think a lot of it has to do with... one of the common criticisms I'd heard before I went into it was their lack of chemistry. And it was like, well, people say that a lot, and sometimes it's fine, but, and the fact that they're, apparently close in real life, but, she gave him his Oscar and everything, but, yeah, there's not really... Like, just watching the movie, it's hard to tell even what their connection is. Like, like we were, over halfway through, and I was like, is it even a romantic thing? I can't even tell. Like, is it supposed to be some sort of tension, that, comes from this romantic place, or comes from this place of romantic betrayal, or whatever it is? She's leaving him notes that say, with love and stuff like that, but they're, cryptic and, dooming, but it's... I just had no idea what their connection was, as far as characters go. I know what they did, or I know what he did in relation to her, and I know why she's coming back for him, but everything else is there's so much more that feels so vague around all this, and I don't know. There is, more action coming in and out. There's the second fight scene where it's mostly him getting his ass beat when Marshawn Lynch and the other guy come in. And those are, entertaining scenes for a while. That's still when we were kind of in our pre-confusing part of the story. And yeah, you can see, his Jackie Chan influence coming in, where it's he uses his environment a lot, and he has to, protect a certain object as this whole fight's going on and everything else is getting destroyed. There's some nice shots in there from, inside a microwave and inside a refrigerator and stuff like that. It's all fun, but then I feel like... Okay, so I said the DeBose character is when it kind of started going off the rails. There's another couple of characters in this, and this is kind of... It was these two characters that made it feel like... Whoa, what... Did the movie change itself? What is going on? Where the hell are we, and who are these people? It's I think it's Kwan's assistant, and then it's one of the guys that was trying to kill him. And Kwan has left him for dead, but he is still alive, and he has a book of poetry that his assistant finds And when she finds his body, in quotes, before she still thinks he's dead, she takes out his poetry book and starts reading it and basically becomes connected to him. And then he wakes up, and the movie when she's reading his poetry, it's like the movie takes on this really serious tone for a little bit. Like it becomes a voiceover over a more serious scene. And then I guess it's supposed to be comedic that she has a connection to him when he wakes up, and they're basically a thing for the rest of the movie. And by that point, it was like, I think you lost me. And then, like I said, the DeBose storyline comes in, and everything gets a lot more muddled as it goes, and it just everything becomes a mess. It becomes tonally fucked, just everything. Another thing is, we were talking about flight risk like a few weeks ago, where it's like if you have somebody who's trying to bring the movie to life a little bit, and you can find them, that can be a problem, and we're at that again with Rhys Darby being in this from Flight of the Conchords, among other Hunt for the Wilderpeople. I'm sure people know him from various other things, and I love him so much, and he's got such a sort of like manic energy when need be, and he spends the whole movie tied to a chair, and he doesn't really get to do much of anything. And it's like you can see him kind of trying to bring life. But again, like for most of his screen time, he is just tied to a chair, and that felt like such a waste. And there's stuff you can do with, dialogue and delivery and stuff like that, or situation or whatever. But this, they don't even try that. He's just tied to a chair, and they are wasting one of the greater comedic talents that they had to work with here. So yeah, and then when it gets to, like, the DeBose stuff, I also found myself struggling to not zone out. And like I said, which is crazy, because these are all people that I love, but it's also such a short movie that seems like it's always moving. But the interest was, like, going in and out in this very small time frame, and that's just kind of crazy. And DeBose actually isn't even in it that much, come to think of it. So that's... but still, it was like it felt like it was getting derailed at like every point once we got past that first like 25 minutes or so. And you just kind of don't know what to think of it after a while. Especially when we get towards the end, and there's this character they've been setting up as like a rival realtor. And I get it, like it was funny in the moment, the way he sort of threw himself into the action and got involved, and then it kind of left a bad taste with the direction they took that. I don't know, and there's on top of just the story itself, there's other tropes abound everywhere here, like fighting to a love song and stuff like that. So this was, like I said, this was really unfortunate. I was rooting for this one, but it just left me mostly confused and discombobulated and all that. But that was a strong like opening 20 minutes or so. So it had that, but then it was trying to do way too much and introduces a lot of stuff kind of at the last minute too, and it's just all over the place. So yeah, that's a bummer. So let's end on Kinda Pregnant, which is Amy Schumer's Happy Madison Netflix movie. That's quite a checklist. So I know most people tend to hate Amy Schumer on sight. I'm not really one of those people. I'm not a fan, but there's some things here and there that I haven't minded. I actually didn't mind her that movie she did with Goldie Hawn, I think Snatched it was called. I watched Trainwreck for Bill Hader, so that's I wasn't that into Trainwreck, but I don't she doesn't strike me as bad as a lot of people like really build her up. I know the joke stealing thing was a big part of that also, but she doesn't just immediately irritate me on sight though, like a lot of people would probably say. So I didn't like... So it was really the Happy Madison Netflix thing that was kind of really filling me with something a little bit negative here. Much as I love Sandler as like a person and his classic movies, Obviously, the Happy Madison brand as of late, um, here and there something might sneak in as, oh, that wasn't terrible, but for the most part, they're very churned out, we'll say, to put it nicely. So, and the director is, has, this is like his fourth, I think, Netflix Happy Madison movie. And, he's Adam Sandler's nephew. Now, when I say that, you might be thinking I'm saying, like, in some jokey way or some sarcastic way of, oh, they must have gotten, it must be nepotism that somebody would make all these Happy Madison movies. No, he's literally Adam Sandler's nephew. Not even, it's not even a joke. So, that's, yeah. So it's going to have the feel of all the other Happy Madison Netflix movies that have been getting churned out. So, it's since, like, 2020. So that's where we are. So yeah, we talked about, romantic comedies and what you can do with that today in Hard Eyes. We just talked about it. So this starts off immediately with a cliche of our main protagonist, Amy Schumer, thinks that her boyfriend is going to propose. Her boyfriend is Damon Wayans Jr. So it's like, oh, he's going to propose, he's going to propose. We got like 3 scenes in the opening of he's going to propose, he's going to propose. So we know that he's not going to propose. The question is how is this scene going to go when he doesn't propose? So we're just kind of waiting for that. And the reveal is kind of funny because Damon Wayans Jr. just has a naturally funny delivery in most of the things that he says in general. So there's that. It's in his blood. He's got it. So once we get to that point is when we get to what everybody's probably expecting out of this movie, which is a lot of loud flailing. So, and she's going to be distraught through a lot of the movie. So we're going to get a lot of that. And it reminds me of, because it's also trying to be like, dirty and R-rated and stuff like that. And we saw how, like, when it's like a female-driven movie and it's very raunchy and R-rated, people will say that it's like, that Bridesmaids kind of set the bar of how this is how you can do this. I don't really think there's much of a division, male or female, because it is just like, if it's a raunchy comedy that's R-rated and funny, then it's just a raunchy R-rated comedy that's funny, regardless. But if you want to take it down the road of what the humor is targeting here, it could go all the way back to when you think about Bridesmaids being like the bar. I'm not a big fan of Bridesmaids. I'm just speaking generally when I say that. Bridesmaids will say set the bar. There's a movie from like 2005, maybe? Like 20 years ago this year. It starred Jenny McCarthy and it was called Dirty Love. And that was Jenny McCarthy's attempt to be super R-rated and raunchy with a comedy. I think she wrote that movie as well. So, and it was an absolute fucking disaster. It was just gross in not the good way. There was no charm to it. Just nothing about it. It was like at the time, I don't think anybody knows about it now, but at the time it came out, it was like notoriously bad. And that's Dirty Love vibes, are kind of what I was getting from what was going on here for a lot of this. So that's not the best place to be. And on top of that, it's got the lying protagonist setup. The plot line where the whole setup is based on the protagonist lying. So we're going to wait the whole movie for the big dramatic reveal where everybody that she cares about and has lied to finds out and distances themselves. Everybody's sad. She has to win their hearts back, etc. So that's like, I really can't stand that the use of that plot. It's worked before with stuff like World's Greatest Dad. Puts a great spin on it. But for the most part, it is just that. And it feels like that's what a lot of like comedies were at a time. Like, I remember just being really sick of comedies or romantic comedies at one time because so many of them started with the lying protagonist. And yeah, and it comes from a very classic place, though, because there's stuff from like way back in the day that always was like somebody's like hiding something or taking on a persona that's not them and having to hide aspects about themselves, and it turned into like really great sort of situations. We're talking like this sort of like Cary Grant era and stuff like that, or Rosalind Russell or something, and it's obviously not that. So yeah, we have like there's every now and then there's something in here that might hit. One thing that I think helps is that the love interest is Will Forte, and Will Forte is like a genius. So he's got something going on here. It's interesting because he definitely works for comedy, and he works for like a drama sort of stray character like we saw in Nebraska. There's like so many things Will Forte can do. It's like endless the things that Will Forte is capable of. And so I was thinking, trying to think of it as like, well, for this movie to work, it's gonna have to feel genuine when it's attempting to be genuinely romantic, because it's not just like it's not taking the every single thing is comedic approach. Like it's trying to do it'll be the raunchy comedy, but it'll also try to be romantic, but it'll also try to be a little, heartfelt and dramatic or whatever. So I was trying to see Forte as like a traditional romantic comedy love interest, and I don't know, there's moments here that work and are sincere, but for the most part, I didn't feel like it was working as a... believe it or not, this movie, I wasn't completely buying as like a genuine, heartfelt sort of thing when it was going for that. So it was really like the comedic elements. Like there's a comedic sex scene, which, everybody will be expecting in a movie like this, where she has to hide the fact that she doesn't actually have a bump. Because that's the lie, if you didn't figure it out, was that everybody thinks she's pregnant when she's not. But only half the people in her life think she's pregnant. The other half are aware that she's not, like her best friend. And you'd think her best friend, who she's known since childhood, we see in the opening scene, you'd think she would get involved in this, at least. It's like, hey, I'm like in a bind here, run with it. But no, she has to keep it from this side and this side. So, yeah. So, it's all the stuff that you would expect, and it's not a lot of big laughs. Like, I'm trying to think, like I said, there's a moment here and there that might hit. I'm trying to remember what they were, and I can't, and I feel like that's telling. So, there's also, like, some scenes just end abruptly when they feel like they could go into other, like, they could, escalate. But, like, there's a moment when she runs into Damon Wayans Jr. in public, and you think that might snowball, but the scene, they have a scene of dialogue, and then the scene just abruptly ends. And, like nobody has any other questions or anything. Like, Will Forte, I think, is there. And there's just nothing. The scene just ends. There's stuff when it tries to be, like, super chaotic. Like, there's a moment where her stomach catches fire, and there's, like, total chaos, but it happens, like, so abruptly. And, when, like, that happens, like, let's say as another example, like, when Mrs. Doubtfire, when her chest went up in flames. When Robin Williams' chest went up in flames. There was something very funny about that, and we were wrapped up in his reaction to it, and that's what generally happens when this domino effect of chaos happens. Meet the Parents basically mastered the domino effect of chaos, and you just get wrapped up in it and wrapped up in it as more and more things go wrong. When this scene happens, when her stomach catches fire and kind of pregnant, it's like you're watching somebody else have a meltdown. Like, you're just kind of... like, it's a lot of noise and a lot of chaos and a lot of flailing, and you're just kind of have no choice but to kind of watch it happen. And there's not that feeling that you're getting wrapped up in some domino effect or some snowball effect of chaos or anything like that. It's just not there. So, I guess if there's one big compliment I can pay this movie that really surprised me, it's one of those things where it's like, the biggest compliment I can give the movie is that it didn't do a bad thing I was expecting it to do. There's still a couple of characters in the movie that are pregnant, and we surprisingly don't have one of my most hated cliches of all time, the comedic, in quotes, birth scene. That's one of the worst things in any comedy ever, and I was shocked that we didn't have to go through that in this. There's like one quick, very quick moment of one of the characters giving birth, and it's like 5 seconds long, and that's it. And so I was very grateful to not have to go through another comedic giving birth scene. So there is that. So yeah, so I don't. It's not a movie I'm like super mad at or that I hate. And when I'm like when I really hate a comedy, I just there's something boiling inside, and I don't have that. I don't know if that's just something that I've like grown out of or what, because I feel like I haven't felt it in a while. But it's not something that I'm like mad at or anything. It's just like a lot of what I've explained. It's like you're just sort of watching everything happen and waiting for just to get to that point of, oh, it's going to be the part where she has to reveal the lie and all the stuff that we know is going to happen, and then that's it. So that's what it is. It's just pretty much goes through the motions of being a Netflix comedy in a nutshell. So we can leave this at this. So next, I've really gotten out of the Marvel thing, but I guess we might see what Captain America's up to, I guess. And other stuff. I'd still like to see the Kiki Palmer movie. The Gorge is something I'm very interested in. All this stuff will be stuff that we're going to talk about very soon. So until then, I think that's it.